Good afternoon to all of you from Pristina. It is my pleasure to welcome you today to the last panel of this forum. I hope you enjoyed the previous panel discussions, and I hope that you have still some energy left for this really interesting topic that our panelists will talk about. But before we jump right into this discussion, I want to tell you that our panelists today will tackle some really tough questions, since talking about integrity compliance in infrastructure projects is really tough. But however, you can also ask questions. If you want to do that, you can raise your hand so I can see you. And I would prefer you to ask your questions directly, so we will allow audio inputs from you. And we really want to have the feeling that this will be a lively discussion. So, by the way, I will measure your interest in this panel through the questions and the comments that you're raising. So let us know that you're still here, even though this is the last panel, and that we have your full attention, because this is a really interesting topic. So who will be talking to you now? I feel really honored to have some very impressive experts on this panel, and let me introduce them to you shortly. We have from Tirana, Mr. Ardian Hackaj. He is the Director of Research and Coordinator of Tirana Connectivity Forum, Cooperation and Development Institute. Welcome, Mr. Hackaj. We have with us Mr. Bojan Marichikj, Minister of Justice of the Republic of North Macedonia. It is an honor to have you here, Minister. With us is also Matteo Rivellini from the European Investment Bank. He's the head of division for Croatia, Slovenia, and the Western Balkans. Benvenuto. And last but not least, Mrs. Odeta Barbullushi. You can see her here, but she's still not in this conversation. She will be joining us later. She's the advisor to the Prime Minister of Albania and the national coordinator of the regional cooperation. So in order to have the insights of the last forum and to hear about the recommendations and the summary, I would kindly ask Mr. Hackaj to give us his input and a short summary of the findings of the previous forum, because he was the one to facilitate the working group on this topic, and he's the one to present the main recommendations. Mr. Hackaj, the floor is yours. Can you please unmute yourself?
Yes, thank you very much. I was saying I will go right into the topic. So basically, the need for to mention or raise this issue of integrity compliance comes from what we observe as a shift of the bulk of the IPA funding, IPA 3 funding, 2021-2027, from, let's say, policies, a key communautaire institution building into projects by the financing of the economic investment plan. As we know, there will be as announced, there will be 9 billion euros that will be that are earmarked for the economic investment plan and the 10 flagship projects. So basically, we move towards a project-based assistance, and the implementation in the Western Balkans includes risks that have been highlighted by the European Commission, and here I will mention two main risks: the states that are captured or captured states, and the capacity of public administration. And these risks basically create two catch-22 situations. The first one is that the EU will transfer this amount of money to states that are captured, and second, the EU will depend on selecting and implementing projects, huge projects that are prepared by administrations that have a low administrative capacity. So, in the current configuration of the IPA 3 disbursement, the bulk, all this money will go to the Western Balkans investment framework, as we know is the mixed blending facility. However, its governance right now, as it is being discussed, it doesn't take into account, for example, the state capture. As for the latest news, it is not recognized as such. Maybe it is talked, but it's not in the minutes. We haven't seen it in the minutes. It recognizes the low capacity of institutions, and it supports it through technical assistance and business consultants. The need for specific EU conditionality mechanism. We should be aware that transferring 9 billion euros in grants, we need to apply the EU conditionality mechanism. However, this mechanism is partially recognized through the need for reforms. So it's not a direct, let's say, relationship, but they need to do the reforms in order to get this money. However, nothing is foreseen that if some conditions, for example, for the rule of law are not fulfilled, a project for railway, let's say, or transport, etc., will not be impacted. The procedure of project selection cannot be impacted with the current conditionality mechanism. And there is also the increasing presence of third actors. It's not being recognized now. We have not seen it in the papers. And we would like to finish with the most important of them all, at least for us, for think tanks and specialized civil society organizations, the importance of human capital, of the local human capital. It's not mentioned. So we are not taking into account for the moment, for as much as we have seen in the documents that we have managed to consult, the role of local human resources, local human capital in the preparation of the new governance mechanism of IBA disbursement. Anyway, to come back, we need to say that we must say that the connectivity agenda projects and the flagship, the 10 flagships that will account for the bulk of these 9 billion euros require a proper governance mechanism, proper integrity compliance rules due to their size, due to their complexity, due to their investment value. They are huge projects, tens and hundreds of millions of euros, and due to the huge number of stakeholders, from the president, prime minister, down to some, let's say, subcontractor. So this mechanism, this good governance mechanism, integrity compliance that has to be applied must be holistic and not siloed. And when we say holistic, it needs to include the needs definition and selection. I mean, which project, what needs do we have and which project to prioritize? The appraisal, the planning, the tendering, the implementation, and the monitoring and audit. Because when we talk about integrity, we think only about procurement. No, when it comes to procurement, it's over. We need to see it from the first phase. The Berlin process, and basically also what I want to add, that when we talk about integrity compliance and good governance in infrastructure, we are talking, and this is very important, about mainstreaming the fundamentals. Mainstreaming the cluster of the fundamentals in the chapters, in all the chapters. What the Berlin process has done, the Berlin process has has made very visible the role of infrastructure, which is very important and systemic, but also the role of civil society and specialized think tanks. In the sense that we have made monitoring reports, we have provided critical knowledge to this. We have been the only ones providing monitoring reports. The only ones is very important on the Berlin process and connectivity agenda, apart from WBA. So basically, we have come with some recommendations. I will mention, they are all in the excellent website that has been set up by the Aspen Institute and Südosteuropa-Gesellschaft, very, very useful. I will just mention some relevant ones, not to take too many minutes. The first one regarding the integrity compliance for these big projects would be for the Western Balkans governments to complete the adoption of integrity compliance plans as per their national strategies, EU obligations, and international best practices. So basically, there are rules in place, they need to be applied. The second one would be to grant to local think tanks and specialized CSOs observer status at the National Investment Committee. This is very precise. We need to know what are the priority projects, because they can change and they change all the time. And as well, we want to have obligatory consultation procedures on laws or on special laws that impact big projects. Now our governments, they are making tailor-made laws to contract big projects, which is not forbidden, but it needs a lot of transparency. For the EU and member states, we would like to mainstream integrity compliance into the economic and investment plan with 10 flagship projects. We want something, for example, given that Mr. Rivellini from AEB is here, we want something like this proactive integrity reviews that AEB does. We need them to be applied to all projects that are financed by the Western Balkans Investment Framework. And we want to be observers in the meetings of the Western Balkans Investment Frameworks. We want to know what's going on. We need more transparency from the EU-supported structures. Two other recommendations for other actors, for the IFIs, for international financial institutions. They should provide accessible, adapted, and updated information for the citizen, for CSOs and for civil society. They produce it, but they must be updated and easily understandable. And also, again, for IFI and development agencies, they should pledge sustainability and long-term viability of their local partners, being them mostly civil societies, specialized think tanks, because at the end of the day, we will serve as, let's say, the canary in the coal mine if one of their projects has problems during the implementation. And I will stop. Anyway, just to say last phrase, all these recommendations, there are many more, they're in the website of Aspen Institute and of Südosteuropa-Gesellschaft.
Thank you so much, because we have to keep in mind that each one of us has only 5 minutes to talk. So we've heard what you said, the recommendations, and also that this integrity compliance, it needs a holistic approach, and that there's a need for reforms, and that we have to keep in mind local human capital, and that's so important, and that we also need proper governance, because the investment value and volume are very high, and also because there are a lot of stakeholders involved. So keeping in mind these and other recommendations that you presented here from the first working group, I would like to ask Minister Marichikj to give his input and his comments on this. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Nora. Distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great honor and pleasure to join this panel discussion organized within the Civil Society and Think Tank Forum Berlin 2021. I particularly enjoy these events, having on my professional background, formerly as a Sherpa for Berlin process for Republic of North Macedonia. So I am so happy to see all these familiar faces, and including my colleague Odeta, with whom we worked a lot in the past years on this task. Ardi, my old friend from the days of my days in civil society, and all the others. The Berlin Initiative plays an important role in the enhancement of regional cooperation and on facilitating the EU integration process for the Western Balkan countries, particularly when it opens topics broader than the usual ones. The Berlin process will be as useful for our citizens as much as it brings tangible results for the citizens. As we know that only by working together and fostering regional cooperation in the framework of various regional initiatives like common regional market, regional or so-called mini Schengen, extension of the VB6, WB6 green corridors or green lanes, Rome like at home project and other similar to that, we can move closer together and closer to the EU. Sorry. As we look at the difficulties caused by the delays in the enlargement process, we believe that we can still identify new ways, new policy areas and financial instruments in order to strengthen the existing ones so that we enhance our contribution to the regional cooperation and to the European Union. Our relationship with the European Union can also be improved in that way and integrate the region gradually to the European single market. In this sense, the Berlin process has been an efficient instrument in producing regionally driven response to our needs and interests. Maybe not fully to our expectations, but certainly much better than what was before 2014. We can all acknowledge the importance of connectivity between Western Balkans and European Union as a key factor for growth and jobs in the region. Republic of North Macedonia continues to undertake steps to improve the connectivity through development of transport and energy infrastructure and promote closer economic cooperation at a regional level. Creating a free, healthy market economy and a favorable business climate in which companies will operate efficiently should be complemented with activities for prevention and fight against corruption and strengthening judicial independence, as it serves as a foundation for rule of law and democracy. These two go together at all times, and they can never be separated if we would like to see operating market economy and independent judiciary and rule of law mechanisms opposed to closed market economy or closed commanded economy and captured state. The Ministry of Justice within its competences has implemented many reform activities in the area of judiciary and rule of law, prevention of fight against corruption in line with international standards, which is noted also by GRECO, the European Commission, and expert teams to review the implementation of the United Nations Convention against Corruption. Particularly the anti-corruption efforts need to be reaffirmed through action towards good governance, risk reduction, zero tolerance, and effective repression. This is exactly what we are trying to establish now as a effective governmental system to fight at national level all the forms of corruption through the governmental system, through the investigative institutions, but also at the final stage, at the most important stage, through the state prosecution office and the criminal section of the high-level corruption section of the criminal court. So this is a closed system, and it can work only like that if it works at all levels, not only at governmental level, not only at the level of judiciary and prosecutor's office, but if it works at all levels. I would also mention the importance of the Anti-Corruption Commission at national level, which is an independent body established by the parliament that gives a lot of impetus to our efforts as a country, and which works in non-selective way. But also we need to upgrade these efforts at regional level, and we commend all the efforts to elevate the topics of anti-corruption, rule of law, and good governance at regional level. I would mention one example. Just recently, we have adopted the regional roadmap on anti-corruption and illicit finance flows. It happened 10 days ago in Ohrid, in North Macedonia. The roadmap would result in the delivery of tangible improvements in the implementation of the existing anti-corruption measures, international standards also, and recommendations, including the European Commission recommendations with respect to the accession of Western Balkans jurisdiction to the European Union. This roadmap was adopted at a ministerial meeting of the ministers for Justice and Home Affairs of the Western Balkan 6 countries. Needless to say, following the recommendation, I must fully agree that Western Balkan governments should grant a place at the table for the civil society organizations, particularly those who follow the work of the institutions in the public procurements, as Ardian mentioned, and in the other areas, and our government is fully open to that cooperation. By providing this seat, governments not only enhance transparency by improving good governance standards, but they also improve their accountability by letting watchdogs to serve the public interest. Thank you so much, and I'm open for further questions.
Thank you a lot, Minister. I've seen that Ms. Barbullushi has joined us. Thank you for being here. So we've heard a summary of the recommendations by Mr. Hackaj, but as you are a Sherpa now, how would these public infrastructure investments integrate the Western Balkan countries from this economic perspective? What are the benefits there, and what are your inputs and comments on the recommendations that have already been made?
Well, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. I apologize for being a few minutes late. As you may know, I was in fact attending with the Prime Minister, I was attending the leaders segment of the Berlin summit, where in fact there was a reconfirmation of the importance of the agenda of connectivity for the Western Balkans, and a reaffirmation of the need to speed up with the implementation of the EU economic investment plan for the Western Balkans. And indeed, Prime Minister Rama emphasized the need for all of us, for 6 countries, to move alongside implementation of this package along with the EU. So I thank you very much for this invitation. It's very timely to discuss this particular segment or component. And in fact, I say it with a sense of pride that when this topic, integrity compliance in infrastructure projects, was brought to my attention, by Hackaj and by other partners working in Tirana, by the Dutch embassy most prominently as well. I jumped to the opportunity of doing something about it, of integrating and streamlining it to what we do. And our colleagues from North Macedonia were very much in line with this, and I helped Bojan and his staff for working at the time as Sherpa in this connection. And the reason why I was positive about this particular element was because it was very obvious the linkage between implementation of connectivity agenda, progress with implementation of the commitments already taken last year in Sofia with regard to common regional market on the one hand, and the fundamentals or the cluster of the chapters on rule of law, progress on rule of law, and existing ongoing reforms in the area of the judiciary and anti-corruption, as indeed foreseen by the revised methodology as well. So in that particular aspect, integrity compliance comes very much as, let's say, as a concept which links good governance, good coordination or better coordination, internal coordination, but also coordination with donors and with the EU, anti-corruption efforts in our countries, and strengthening rule of law on the one hand, with implementation of EU standards, particularly when it comes to infrastructure projects. And thirdly, and not less importantly, the socioeconomic impact. And I'm very glad that there is now a growing literature, particularly on the socioeconomic impact of infrastructure, of connectivity projects since 2015, since the approval of connectivity package for the Western Balkans, as indeed part of the Berlin process. And here I would echo what was already highlighted by previous speakers with regard to the importance of connectivity in not only in bringing the region closer or connecting the countries of the region and countries of the region with the EU, but also in post-COVID recovery and resiliency. And here where I speak of resiliency, I have in mind socioeconomic resiliency, not just institutional, but also socioeconomic, that what we are already building and our efforts in reconstruction are sustainable and are long-term. And that's how we envisage also in the framework or in the context of continuing with reconstruction efforts following the earthquake of 2019 and also the pandemic last year. We envisage this effort to be sustainable and build resiliency. And in order for connectivity and development that connectivity has the potential to bring to be sustainable, we need to monitor the process from the early stages so that we can make the process sustainable from the very beginning till the very last stages throughout the project cycle. Now, I must say here that infrastructure and connectivity is not my primary expertise, but I'm very much focused on it as part of what we do in the context of Berlin process and in the context of implementing common regional market. And as it was also emphasized today, when we think about creating a market in the region, it's difficult to create a market unless there is a facilitation of transport and there is an addressing of all bottlenecks in our border crossing points. And here I'm very glad to share or to make a reference to the latest good news in the region, which is the signing of the bilateral agreement on the facilitation of goods in all border crossing points with North Macedonia, with particular focus on Chavthana. Now, let me say a few words about how we envisage integrity compliance. I mentioned three components: good governance, EU standards and rule of law, and socioeconomic impact. With regard to good governance, I already mentioned that that refers to both intra-coordination, but also donor coordination. And it refers to our efforts to make the project cycle more efficient, more transparent, and enforce or strengthen instruments of monitoring and of anti-corruption. In that connection, as we are already planning and strategizing for the third mandate of the government, we are thinking strategically about setting up a cross-sectorial, a cross-institution, but more centralized instrument, which would help to coordinate better between donors or among partners, but also domestically, internally coordinate better. And in that connection, we are also planning on digitalizing the tracing of the entire project cycle from the very early stages of writing and planning to the very last stages, and to monitor also the social economic impact in mid and long term. In that particular connection, we have two, I think, important elements which demonstrate the will of the government to integrate this element in our connectivity projects. One, of course, is the memorandum, the MOU between our Ministry of Infrastructure and Energy and the Dutch Embassy in October 2019, focused primarily on integrating this element in the planning and monitoring of infrastructure projects and connectivity projects more broadly. But the second, of course, reference, and I think Ardian already has mentioned, is of course the reference that we made at the regional level, at the Sofia statement last November, and that is indeed a sign of agreement and commitment at the highest level. In addition, I would also mention another step that we have taken domestically, that we started in 2020 amid the pandemics, in fact, was the starting of implementation of the plan of integrity, what is called the plan of integrity at the Minister of Justice, which is to serve as a template, as a pilot, indeed, a pilot project for all the other ministries and key agencies, which have also an important role to play when it comes to good governance and when it comes to transparency and accountability of public administration. And here what I have in mind is primarily those sectors of public administration which are the primary providers, so to speak, of services in areas like property restitution, property registration, public health, procurements, which was already mentioned here as well, tax and customs administration. These are for us the key sectors where we see endemic and systemic demonstration of systemic episodes or cases of corruption, and this is where we also see these cases across the Western Balkans. So these are areas where we could indeed work better and work more together. And here again, the case of the roadmap of anti-corruption of all 6 countries, which was only agreed upon last week, is a very good step, a first step in that direction. I would mention 2 things which we find important, and I think come as a response to what also Ardian was saying, and what
sorry that I have to remind you that we have to keep our 5 minutes.
Yes. One is the importance of having civil society on board, and here I echo the words of what was already saying by Bojan, and the importance of having a platform of organizations which have indeed expertise in public procurement, anti-corruption, but also connectivity agenda. And the second, how to find a balance between the specificity of each country and public administration of each one of the 6 from the Western Balkans, and at the same time having a comprehensive regional approach to integrating integrity compliance in the infrastructure projects and in connectivity. It is a good moment, if I may also add the last sentence, to think about this concept, as we are also in the process of planning for the next 10 years of the 10T connectivity package. And this might be indeed a good time to have a regional approach and strengthen accountability and monitoring on this particular concept. Thank you very much, and I'm open for questions if there are any.
Thanks a lot. There are some questions, but we will come back to them later. Thanks a lot for sharing the good news from your previous meeting with us, and also for giving all these very specific examples from Albania. I think that's very inspiring for the others to follow your lead. Mr. Rivellini, you're also here still. You've heard the summary, and you already know that the first working group has also included some recommendations for the EU member states, but also for international financial institutions. So what are your comments on this?
Thank you, Nora, and it is a great honor and pleasure to be together with you at this extremely interesting webinar. It is an honor because it happens the day of the summit of the Berlin process that Odeta was reminding us a few minutes ago, that not only reconfirmed the connectivity being at the core of, let's say, the investments ahead in the region, but also the commitment of the European Union in its enlargement vision insofar as this region is concerned. It is a pleasure because discussing these items, these considerations, and this area of due diligence, if you like, for us as bankers, is extremely soliciting, because we have developed further and further an attention and care for these matters over time. As EIB, I would like simply to say that we are certainly the largest financier of connectivity in the region. Today, we, at the occasion of the participation of our president at the Berlin summit, we went public with some summary of our actions insofar as connectivity. I just wanted to say that one figure, just to give you an order of magnitude, the EIB has financed over 5 billion euro so far to support connectivity infrastructure projects, clearly the bulk being in the transport sector, but not only. And that gives us the opportunity to elaborate a few considerations, and particularly on certain findings that Ardian was mentioning earlier on the result of the results of findings of the civil society forum. In this respect, I would like to say just 2 or 3 things. Well, number one, I think we all need to recognize that we are all experiencing a progress. We are seeing things that are improving over time. As a banker of EIB, if I think the way we have carried out the due diligence of certain sections of Corridor 10 in Serbia, for example, Corridor 10 road in Serbia, and I compare them with the way we now assess, for example, certain section of Corridor 5C road in Bosnia and Herzegovina, or not to think the way we are already starting our due diligence on Corridor 10 rail in Serbia, I don't want to say that it's day and night, but we have improved dramatically on the way we look also at the compliance and integrity, for example, not only, but we have increased a lot the degree of care of our due diligence. More than this, we have experienced the progress in promoters. I mean, we have seen a very significant development on capacity, for example, in procurement. We ourselves, we have experienced a lot of disasters, a lot of failures, but these have made a lot of promoters much better over time and capable in dealing with international and European standards in terms of procurement legislations, for example. The third thing that I wanted to say is I was very much, let's say, stricken by the reference to the human capital, and this is Ardian made reference to the importance of human capital. In this case, I mean, for us is is extremely important. I just want to give you an example and how the capacity of the public administration for us is key to develop a European agenda for this region. In Serbia, we have since not long time ago, we have made sure that the first instance remedy mechanism, the national procurement basically remedy mechanism, has jurisdictions over the issues pertaining procurement with EIB finance project. This is a very important innovation, because you may want to remember that a number of procurement legislation in the country were drafted by other financiers in the aftermath of the conflicts, with the idea that all let's say projects financed by international financial institutions had to be decoupled from the organization of the local and the national mechanisms. We thought that it's important instead to increase the capacity of judiciary, administrative capacity of a number of instances at the local level to ensure that, let's say, the capacity keeps increasing. Have we done everything? Are we perfect? Is the region perfect? I don't think so. There is still a lot of area of improvement. I speak for the EIB. We're trying to improve a lot. We're, for example, on integrity and compliance, we have launched a public consultation on our new policy framework, and I invite you all to look at it and to comment on it. And I give you an example about how we were trying to improve. I mean, long time ago, we financed a lot of financial intermediaries, both of commercial and public natures. And we just told them, look, finance certain types of projects, green projects, innovation projects, whatever. We didn't ask them to be extremely careful on integrity and on compliance long time ago. Now we've changed. We're trying to improve. We have put a new standard in our due diligence that pertains to intermediated financing to ensure that also our intermediaries are bound to our policy framework insofar as integrity and compliance are concerned. I stop here and I remain available for any questions you may have. I just wanted to give you a few elements of consideration. Thank you, Nora.
Thank you so much, and I'm glad to hear that there are things improving and that there's some movement even in there. Before we start with the second round of my questions, there are some questions in the chat box, and I would like to ask Mr. Hackaj to answer on the first one. If you can see the question as well, right?
Yes, I can see. Yeah, it's regarding the information provided to citizens. It's exactly this kind of situation that by being, let's say, part or having this or closer to the part of the mechanism that decides or prioritizes the projects, that will allow us, let's say, representative of the citizens, civil society, specialized think tanks, to be proactive. Well, the case that you're referring is a very special case. It has been very conflictual, very contradictory, and there has been a decision of the Constitutional Court lately. But given that it's an infrastructure project at the end of the day, if we are in the loop from its identification, we would be able to say out and loud if we like it, if we don't like it, why, and the reasons why we take this decision. We would not only react after the government has taken this decision. So this is my comment for it.
So much. Thank you. I hope that the person who asked the question is satisfied with the answer. If not, you can also raise your hand and ask the other questions for audio input. That's also a possibility. Okay, so we would continue with some other questions because I find this topic very interesting. During this moderation session, I'm also learning a lot from you, information that I didn't have before. And what I would like to know, and I will just continue with Mr. Rivellini, is what exactly does this connectivity agenda include, and how does it look like in real life, like practically? What are the benefits and the tangible results that are coming out of this for the countries of the Western Balkan 6, but also for the local economies? If you could just tell us some practical examples.
But thank you, Nora. I mean, the practical examples, I mean, not long ago, it was displayed a promotional video about the benefits, for example, of Corridor 5C in Bosnia and Herzegovina. The tangible benefit is, for example, for the truck drivers, for the lorry drivers, is to decrease, let's say, the time for going from basically north to south in Bosnia and Herzegovina by almost half. So that gives you a tangible idea of how connectivity can improve the lives of citizens or the lives of economies in this respect. But that's a very simple example. I would like to mention more importantly or let's say underline what Odeta said. I think we are at the turning point. Now connectivity agenda has been spelled out in the economic and investment plan with the flagship projects. We know that we know what the polar star is that we need to follow as far as the next and upcoming investment. But what is important is that these investments are made and carried out in a way that these economies gain also in terms of economic resilience. And this is a way of looking at investments that are sustainable. We have examples of investments that do not have a proper economic return, that do not, let's say, that are not sustainable for public finances of certain countries. I think what we need to have in mind is the sustainability over time and increased resilience of the economies going forward in the context of this connectivity agenda. Is it all going well in terms of implementation? No, I think we're late on a number of infrastructure projects, in connective infrastructure projects, and I can give you a few examples of weaknesses. You know, we spoke about weaknesses of public administration or procurement capacity. I think rule of law defines the entirety of the area that still needs to be reinforced. And here I would like to say the connectivity is yet a great opportunity to seize, to accompany not only investments that perhaps helping converging towards European standards and economic standards, but is also an opportunity to ensure that reforms attached to the rule of law are further boosted, because otherwise these projects, as it also mentioned in the conditionality that the economic reform programs are putting forward, may be further delayed, and citizens may be lesser and lesser, let's say, passionate about the European project going forward. Thank you. Thank you, Nora.
Thank you so much. If it's okay for you, I would like to give Lori Amy the floor. That's the person who made the question.
Okay, thank you very much.
Could you just present yourself and the institution that you're representing?
Yes, so I am a professor of cultural studies and writing working in Albania with the non-governmental organization Autonomy, and at this moment I am finishing my book on the structure of state violence under the communist regime and the transgenerational transmission of trauma, which I think would indicate why I have a particular interest in what is happening in Albania with the Pyramid Project. So to keep, however, closely focused for the themes of this forum, I would ask a two-part question. Following up, Ardian, on your lucid and spot-on analysis of some of the ways that we can bring greater transparency and accountability by raising the voices and the profiles of the civil society actors who have knowledge and expertise. I want to connect that to Odeta, what you outlined as some important starting points towards integrity and accountability. What I am particularly concerned with, though, is the Ministry of Justice being a key player in how we envision bringing accountability, when we know that in states of capture, the judiciary is a key player, and particularly in Albania, where crimes in the hypotheca are the starting point for corruption and illegal development. So we have the most corrupt judiciary in the region, precisely in relation to the failures of restitution and privatization in a country where every centimeter of land had been expropriated. So property restitution is much more than a simple economic issue. This is the most pervasive human rights issue in the country. We're not going to deal with corruption and state capture until we deal with property, and we cannot deal with property. Sorry to interrupt,
you just have to keep it short. So sorry.
Okay.
Just, if you can just wrap it up, sorry.
Thank you very much for reining me in, and I think that's enough context. But the question is simply, how then will we proceed in a state of capture for accountability in infrastructure projects in Albania when much of the failure of accountability starts with the property crimes that began in the hypotheca, the property office? And then how is that related, Odeta, to the Ministry of Justice being a lead point in integrity and accountability when that's, you know, a place where we have some of our greatest corruption?
Thanks a lot. Mr. Hackaj, would you like to start with the first part of the question?
Well, I'd start by repeating what I said before, that it needs to be a holistic approach. I mean, here we are talking about infrastructure, and I mean, at least the development, the argument that I did concerned about the infrastructure project. What Ms. Ami is saying, it's about a different policy level and the institutional level. So not about the project, but about the institution, about different legal framework. She has a point. I mean, she's right. We have been hearing and discussing about corruption, and but there is no magic or golden key. There is no magic wand. I mean, each institution, each project, each well, as Odeta mentioned before, I mean, there is a plan. It needs to be adopted. It has not been adopted yet. There is a little bit late. This adoption plan of integrity compliance that the Ministry of Justice in Albania has prepared. And also it needs to be implemented and also monitored, because the problem remains at implementation. But may I take this opportunity to respond a little bit to what Matteo said. I was very intrigued about this Corridor 5, Corridor 10 improvement of quality. And it's true, actually. But I just wanted to bring in, Matteo, the idea that some of the biggest critics of the Corridor 5 have been civil society organizations. So, and I think that they, I mean, in Bosnia, and I think that they have had their contribution into this kind of absolutely undeniable quality hub that you have done from Corridor 10 to Corridor 8. And regarding the human capital, I fully agree. I mean, it's undeniable that the effort to include or to make it conditional, the participation of state administration in the procurement is absolutely a very good thing. And this is what we are asking. However, our focus, it's not only on the public administration, it is also on the specialized think tanks and civil society organizations that know very well, and academic institutions, engineer bodies, and all this kind of persons that are very well qualified and have critical knowledge to participate or to give their contribution in those projects. One thing, for example, that for me it's very difficult to explain, it's how it comes that all the, I mean, at least until a year ago, all the companies that were contracted under the IPF were foreign companies. I mean, there were even the consortium, there were no company that came from the Western Balkans. Now, I mean, it's difficult for me to understand that there are no proper engineers that work on infrastructure that can provide very good projects, for example. So I think that when the procurement is done on part of, let's say, of the quality of what services are bought, for example, in this case, because they are business consultants, a certain attention should be paid also to the impact that they leave on the human capital. Not to mention that all the individual, let's say, experts come from their locals, most of them. So this is my point.
Thank you so much. You see, we only have 9 minutes left because this is so interesting. I have so many more questions. Mr. Hackaj, I would just like to continue with you. We've heard there are a lot of weaknesses inside, like procurement capacities, the human resources that we've mentioned, and a lot of other obstacles. But there are also external factors that are very relevant in regard to the connectivity agenda. And we know that 5 of the Western Balkan countries, which are Bosnia and Herzegovina, Montenegro, Albania, Serbia, and North Macedonia, are members of the 17+1 mechanism, a platform for China's collective approach to Central and Eastern Europe region. So my question is, to what extent does China's initiative influence the whole connectivity agenda? So is this a competition or is this a support?
I think it is interesting. It's a very interesting question. I mean, for me, one of the first impact, it's the direct competition to AB, for example, for mature projects. So now the countries in the Western Balkans or the government, they can shop elsewhere for financing for projects that they want to finance, and now it's not very easy to find good mature projects that are financially sustainable, as all the financiers know. So also there may be also pressure on the financing conditions. Which is I think this is welcome. Another problem is the reduction of the fiscal space of the countries, because the more projects they contract with the Chinese, for example, the less fiscal space they will have to contract or to have loans with the European, let's say, institutions. It is also a pressure, I would say, a kind or a gentle, well, not so gentle pressure for the European institutions to accelerate their implementation pace. It's a problem that that has kind of impacted the initial programming and implementation of WBAF infrastructure projects. So there have been also reports about negative environmental impact, but I should ask that this is not proper to Chinese projects. It impacts more or less, I mean, comparatively also other projects. The specificity, the fact why it's mentioned to the Chinese is because not in the connectivity agenda, but in productive activities, they have focused in carbon-intensive activities like mining, like production of power plants to coal, etc., which are inherently polluting. And I will stop there.
Thank you so much. We have 5 minutes left. Next time, maybe we can plan more time for this discussion. Minister Marichikj, we know that the connectivity agenda is one of the most important approaches and projects, and we've heard from different, we've seen it in different reports, and we know that there are a lot of obstacles and challenges. We've already addressed them here at this panel. So poor governance, the so-called state capture phenomena, and also corruption, which is being mentioned so many times, or one of many obstacles here. But and also we've heard here that there are a lot of special laws that have been passed by the Western Balkan 6 parliaments in order to allow direct procurement, bilateral direct procurement for bigger projects. But you see, so these challenges that are there and that we're suffering from, how can we overcome them? How do you do that in North Macedonia? If you can tell us some specific examples and also give a recommendation in the end. I really hope that you can keep it very short so that we can also give the floor to Ms. Barbullushi.
Yeah, it's lucky that you ask a very easy question so I can answer in 3 minutes. I'll try to be as brief as possible. You know, first of all, I think we need high standards for public procurement rules, but also high standards for anti-corruption rules, including asset recovery and everything that can stem from corruptive activities. So I think this is the first precondition. Second, on the side of the government, zero tolerance for corruption and very strict rules for the government officials and their work and participation at in the office. The third thing is firm watchdogging from the civil society organizations, but also from the anti-corruption commissions, which I think they exist everywhere in the region. So firm watchdogging at that site is very important, and principled work. And finally, which in my opinion is most important, independent and efficient public prosecutor's office, because the investigations must be well prepared, well supported by evidence, and well structured in front of the court, and independent and efficient judiciary. So if this system as a whole doesn't work, then we can certainly say that it's difficult to release from the capture state, because in the capture state, because we did have a capture state back in the previous regime. Now I think it's quite different, although there are a lot of problems and issues in the judiciary. But basically, in the capture state, it's not only about political influence; it's also about interests of a business sector and business structures. And I think this is also a factor that we need to tackle. So for 3 minutes, this is what I can say.
Thank you.
Just in the bullets, and thank you for the invitation.
Thank you so much for these recommendations. Mrs. Barbullushi, how do you have some additional recommendations? How do you think that we can enhance integrity and compliance?
Yes, I have. Thank you, Nora. I have 2 or maybe three very brief recommendations, one very quick comment. The recommendations, the first one, concerns the provision of services. These are the sectors which, like I mentioned, are the sectors where we find most systematically spread different forms of corruption in the region. And here it includes those offices which used to provide services in the area of not only procurement, but also of property and so on, of taxation and so on. So in that regard, it is of utmost importance that we digitalize everything. We make everything transparent, and every process can be traced and can be seen and can be monitored.
I have difficulties in hearing you. I don't know if the others can hear you. No? We cannot hear you, Ms. Barbullushi.
Wi-Fi?
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So I don't know.
I think your internet connection is not good. We can't hear you.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
No. I'm so sorry.
Can you hear me now?
No.
This is what happens when you only give me 2 off. Okay. I'm putting my video off so I can be heard.
Yeah, now it's better.
Very tough choice to be made here. Yes, face or voice. And this is what happens when you only give me 2 minutes time. So this is us, and this is what we are trying now to do, also with a more centralized unit on donors coordination and on monitoring the project cycle, particularly in infrastructure projects, that we can follow and trace the process from the very moment of conception to the very last stage of implementation. The second, I think, some concepts were, with regards to state capture or corruption, were slightly loosely used. I think in the case of Albania, we have the case of a very comprehensive and deep reform of the judiciary, which I think by even some of the most critical or fair and critical member states was actually referred to as an example that can be emulated by other countries in the region when it comes to the depth and the extent of the judiciary reform. And I think that spills over to other sectors beyond the judiciary. And that's, I think, very important, that we also strengthen what was mentioned by Bojan, of course, the national coordinators against corruption, which in our case and I think in the case of other countries in the region, our ministers of justice, but also the coordinators and other units of anti-corruption across the public administration. A very quick third comment, Nora. I thank you for bringing up third actors and third powers in the region. I think this is where the concept of integrity compliance comes in to also as let's say a helpful concept to also counter the influence of third powers. I mean, this is an area where we are talking about enforcement of EU standards, and we are talking about in a way reaffirming the alignment of our countries in the region with Western partners, with the EU and Western partners when it comes to connectivity projects. And I think this is becoming more increasingly important. So thank you very much for the invitation to speak on these issues. And I am open to continue this discussion either of the aspects which were touched upon here. There were many, many interesting aspects we couldn't elaborate on. Thank you.
Thank you so much for these. I will just take these as closing remarks since we have passed our time. And I would like to thank you for sharing your opinions and your expertise with us, and also the audience for being so patient and for being interested in this panel. I will hand over my microphone to Hans-Jörg Gray. And thank you so much for this discussion. I hope to see you soon again.
Thank you, Nora. This was the last panel of the Civil Society and Think Tank Forum 2 within the Berlin Process 2021. And this is the time to say a few words of farewell and thanks on behalf of the organizers of this forum, indeed of the two successive forums, the organizers, Aspen Institute Germany and Südosteuropa-Gesellschaft Southeast Europe Association. A great thank you goes to all those who have taken an active role in today's forum as speakers and moderators. Now, as you have noticed, we have structured our panel starting with the inputs from our civil society and think tank representatives, indeed with those who have taken the most active role in the whole process by preparing background papers, facilitating the working groups during Forum 1, preparing the recommendations on behalf of their working groups, and convey their messages and findings to decision makers in various formats. Great thanks for the serious and successful work you have done. We firmly hope that many of the very concrete and clear analysis and recommendations find their way into decision-making processes on all levels. As for the outputs of this forum, or rather the two forums, all materials, recommendations, papers, and all the videos are available until the end of the month, still on this platform, but permanently on the websites of Aspen Institute and of Southeast Europe Association. Let me continue by thanking the distinguished politicians, other officials and experts from the Western Balkan region and beyond, who have dedicated their time and expertise to today's forum. The great commitment to the role of civil society as expressed in many of the politician statements is a reason to hope that the expertise of civil society will be more widely included in the political process all over. Our thanks also go to all participants who have joined us during both forums. Indeed, we would have really liked to host you in person, but unfortunately the pandemic has not allowed that. So we do hope that all future events in the context of the Berlin process will be organized in a setting where our present period of COVID-19 will be just a remembrance of the past. Let me conclude with my words of thanks to the German Chancellery and the German Federal Foreign Office for entrusting us with the organization of this forum and the support that they have given us throughout. To European Western Balkans, serving as a media partner for the forum. To the creator and host of a great platform, we are just using, Mr. Gaston Geilenkoten. We have received a lot of positive feedback as to this excellent platform, and some colleagues have expressed interest in even adopting it for their own work. I'm looking at Adrian. Ardian has been one of these. Finally, I will quit my position of speaking on behalf of the two organizations and switch to a rather personal note. It has been a great experience again after a successful cooperation on the conference on migration during the German EU presidency in October last year, to cooperate with our dear colleagues from Aspen Institute, Germany. A great thanks to Valeska Esch, to Yannick Remme, indeed the person mostly involved in all the complex and difficult work for preparation of the two forums, to Victoria Palm and Tina Borries for their highly professional technical support, enabling a smooth performance of both forums. Thanks also to Richard Kaufmann and his student colleagues who have helped a lot in the background. And last but not least, my colleague Christian Hagemann, who has always been my partner in our team of the Southeast Europe Association. On these notes, I wish you all best success, enjoyable summer holidays, and also, as has become a usual expression in Germany during Corona, bleiben Sie gesund, stay healthy. Bye-bye, and this is the end of our forum. Have a nice time. All the best to you.